Welcome to the Innovation Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Innovaccer, the data platform that accelerates innovation in healthcare. We're on a mission to connect and curate the world's healthcare information to make it accessible and useful. Accelerate innovation, digital transformation, and your success with population health, customer relationship management, and value-based care with Innovaccer. Visit us online at innovaccer.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Innovation Accelerator podcast. I'm Gary Druckenmiller Jr., General Manager of Experience at Innovaccer. And today we'll be continuing our 2023-2024 theme of reinventing the CMO, that's Chief Marketing Officer. With today's guest, I'm very proud to have him with us today. We've been working together for a number of years. Don Stanziano, Chief Marketing Officer at Geisinger Health. Hello, Don. Hello, Mr. Stanziano. Good to see you, my friend. We've been at this for a while, so I'm really glad you accepted the invite, especially coming into 2024. It's already proving to be, I think, a very exciting year. I should say that. Screaming out of the gates, we're seeing a lot of real positive stuff, but it's going to have some its rocky moments still, as we're still trying to recover from 2020, 2021, and all that other stuff. But I think we've crossed the chasm, and I think we're heading in the right direction. And I think everybody here wants to hear your interpretation of that, and we'll get it through all of that with a whole series of decent questions that cuts from growth marketing to value-based care to health equity to data management. We're going to cover it all today. And who better to answer a lot of these important questions that yield really important answers than you, somebody who's been in this space, both from a brand side and a technical side, for your entire career. So let's go back in time a little bit. In 120 seconds or less, and if this turns into 240, if it turns into 580, that's fine. Our listeners would really love to hear from you first. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what your role is at Geisinger, what you and your team focus on every day. And I particularly would love for them to hear, because I already know what it is, your career journey, which is I always found to be a real interesting one that brought you to where you're at today. And it started in the best of ways to get you to where you're at today. So we'll hand it over to you. Yeah, give us a little bit of history and time here for you.
I am the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Geisinger Health. I have been here. I just hit my 6-year mark a couple weeks ago. So hard to believe time flies, and it's been a weird journey with the pandemic and everything else that. Yeah.
You came in right at the right
time. Interesting ride. But I've told folks this. It's been the best. My career just keeps building on itself, and this has been a great experience here at Geisinger. And but I started out as a journalist way back, and I don't want to date myself too badly, but I was doing journalism for about a decade as a reporter, as an editor, in print, broadcast, and made the transition to healthcare public relations, and bounced around San Diego a couple years. I was at Sharp Healthcare, went to Scripps Health in San Diego for a couple years doing media relations, and then left and went to work for a member of the House of Representatives, was a communications director, a press secretary. Really fascinating experience there. And you want to talk about pressure and learning how to package a message. I got Yes, exactly.
It's more about what not to say.
And then went back to Scripps. And after that experience and doing some consulting for a couple of years, and engaged with Scripps as a consultant, and they brought me in-house again, and expanded into internal communications and ultimately marketing. And really took that department into what I would say into 21st century marketing, brought in a CRM, got into, data back when that was still fairly nascent, and particularly in healthcare. Ultimately did that until I left in 2018 to join Geisinger, leaning into digital early and really embracing growth marketing in healthcare, which I remember the first time I called our patients customers in front of a group of doctors at Scripps, I almost got run out of the room. But so it's a journey, right?
Yeah,
and
get them out of
here we are today, where everybody's talking about customers, everybody's talking about ROI, everybody's talking about how do we leverage data better. So I'm really excited for the conversation today. I arrived at Geisinger in 2018, and similarly, great organization, great national reputation, great brand, and great innovation sort of reputation. Ironically, and the marketing function didn't really measure up to its reputation, and it needed to be reimagined again. And so that's what we've been on this journey for 6 years. Again, bringing in a CRM, leveling up digital marketing, bringing in the right talent to work that way, focusing on growth marketing, but also the brand was too modest, and we updated the branding, put a story together. And I think the through line in my career has been storytelling. And we talk a lot about, and we're going to talk a lot today about digital and data and targeting and audience segmentation and all that. But at the end of the day, it's delivering the right message to the right customer at the right time and getting them inspired to take an action. I don't look at my portfolio, even though on the surface it can look very broad. The through line is it's storytelling with a purpose to achieve a business result. And so to me, the journalism built on the public relations, was built on the branding, which builds on the growth marketing, and the data and analytics is all there just as sort of infrastructure to leverage that storytelling to motivate people to do what we want them to do.
Yeah. I mean, in many respects, if you think, I'm sure that's kind of how you just said, you're looking back, you're like, wow, I really started in the right spot to get to where we're at right now. Think how many, again, keep saying CMO, but let's just spell it out for the beginning here. We're talking chief marketing officers, right? Think about how many have the appropriate balance of left brain and right brain mentality. That is how most probably started in somewhat similar fashions. I know that there's a bunch of CMOs out there that started also in journalism and they're more communication specialists in order, crisis communications, because that was obviously a huge thing before the whole growth marketing thing really started to step into play. And then, like you said, it's kind of evolved. But during that same time period of that evolvement, technology started rising up. Some bit off, like you did, early, 10 years early, 10 years before COVID, right? There's Don Stanziano, and now they are being crashed together like a couple of neutron stars, like on some sort of destiny with each other. And we're struggling to kind of pull them together. That's what an amazing journey that is. And that's gotten you to here. And so your foresight on this is always, and will continue to be probably way better than most because of that, because many are now taking their first step into this technological universe, which is supposedly supposed to do a lot of this historical work for us, right? We've got AI writing content now, got AI determining what communications go out. So our roles are now going back to becoming more strategic. So let's dive into that. Thank you for that intro. As I looked at the list, and Judy will appreciate the call out for HMPS and Forum coming up in April. I'm not shocked and surprised at the amount of roles that include the title or the term consumer in them, or customer. It's kind of neat, right? But like, what do they do? and who now owns that? Is it these folks over here, consumer innovation? You got chief marketing officers. So I'm going to focus on that term to start in your eyes, because you're responsible for growth, but that growth is customer growth. And I'm going to continue to use that term with you. So how does customer growth for you and Geisinger support the growing financial concerns of the health system, knowing that they also want to kind of probably play in some other worlds as well? But how are you taking on that responsibility and how does it support the revenue goals, the EBITDA goals of Geisinger overall?
we have targets at Geisinger. We know how much we want to grow. And the term organic growth is used a lot. Like, I'm not a big fan of that term, but I understand. Yeah. Well, so many health systems look at growth, to really gain market share dramatically. They want to acquire, like they do it through acquisitions and mergers, and there's a lot of that activity now. And that's all fine. That is growth. But organic growth, meaning with your current infrastructure, adding more customers. So, and that's marketing driven. It's got to be marketing driven. Seeing patients as customers. And the way I look at it is you're a patient when you're under care, but you're a customer when you're making decisions about where to receive the care. And that's the way I've talked about it with our physicians, to get them comfortable. Because the patient has a choice where they go. They have a choice if they want to come back. They have a choice if they want to use us for other things. That's when they're a customer. So I love the trend toward customer. I think it's smart. And when you look at who we're competing against now, we're not just competing against ourselves, other health systems, the disruptors in the space who want to take pieces of our portfolios, like the Amazons and the retailers and others. They see our patients as customers, so we better see them as customers. The other thing that's interesting about Geisinger and why I was attracted to this role is that it's an integrated delivery network. So we're not just hospitals and physicians and health services. We're also a health plan. So the insurance piece, which my team also has responsibility for marketing, is very consumer focused and consumer driven. And there's a sales team to support. There's hard targets. So, I mean, this is marketing in the way that you would find in other industries, unlike traditionally in hospital organizations. So, we're supporting Geisinger's growth by understanding how much we want to grow our market share in our clinical services, how much we want to grow our membership in our health plan, and then looking at what marketing's contribution to that growth ought to be. The total addressable market, what can we attract, and then we set our own targets and we have our own dashboards. And to do that takes data.
Accurate data. Just add that in there, which seems to be the belly and the beast, the beast and the belly. Well, you know what I mean. It is. It's a hard thing to get your arms around. We'll find our way there. But you're, again, a testament. You're now a data-driven marketer first and foremost. And with that, those growth targets, one of the things that's kind of reshaping itself yet again, and we're hearing this a lot on our end in the Innovaccer side, is being able to forecast capacity. Incredibly difficult thing to do, especially for your commercial self-selective kind of service lines and subspecialties. It's very, very hard to say, well, we expect 30 more cases per whatever of non-invasive orthopedic shoulder surgery, and for the next whatever number of weeks or months or whatever. It's hard, and that also takes a lot of intelligence. So my follow-up question with my first one here is understanding that these acquisition initiatives can place a burden to help balance capacity and growth. And any of your efforts, especially when it comes to like workforce shortages and staff displacement, they only add to this kind of burden of understanding capacity, because now you got, and maybe you can expand on this, how your physician base is kind of moving in and out of Geisinger, the stresses and burdens that they're feeling. What are some methods that can help alleviate some of these staffing shortfalls, particularly when we know we're trying to get better at forecasting the capacity so that you can help improve those growth numbers? They're inextricably linked, whether we realize it or not. Alleviate some of these staffing shortfalls while also setting a future stage for consumer acquisition.
You are hitting on, Gary, the biggest challenge facing healthcare organizations right now. It is the issue of 23 and 24. It's a hangover from COVID, quite frankly. We have it's just changed the game on labor and staffing, and how folks who are trained to deliver care are thinking about their careers and their jobs. And we've lost a lot of them out of the industry. So staffing shortages are real, and unfortunately, I think they're here for a while. which is forcing organizations like ours and every other healthcare organization to think more innovatively and more creatively about how to address that, because the demand for care is even greater, and yet the resources to provide the care are limited. I think a strong digital strategy that allows for self-service and all the obvious things that a lot of us have been doing for a long time in our organizations, like online check-in, online bill pay, online scheduling, putting that on steroids and making sure that, because more and more folks who are using healthcare more, dare I say folks like me, who are now getting into the age group where you're actually using it.
Please, you haven't aged at all. I keep getting older, but you managed to stay the same. I don't know what deal with the devil you wrote on that.
I'll tell you later. But one of the silver linings out of COVID was the just rapid adoption of telemedicine. And while that's leveled off, and we all struggle with figuring out how to scale it and staff it, I think looking for ways to make our services available digitally and alleviating the need for bricks and mortar and the staffing of bricks and mortar facilities is all good, and we're going to be continuing to work on that. And it goes back to we're going to say the word data probably in every part of this conversation, because you need to know who. It's both a tool. You need data to know who you're targeting, who to offer this stuff to, but then that engagement with the customer is collecting data that then you can continue to re-leverage, right? And it just makes obviously appropriately following HIPAA, all that stuff. But everything, and I think it's both in authenticated experiences behind firewalls and unauthenticated, on your public website, and finding ways, and through mobile apps and all that stuff, finding ways to make more of our services available, and making sure that we're taking and seeing that as part of care delivery, and understanding that is part of the customer experience as well, and making those experiences optimal. Our customers are sophisticated. They're more sophisticated than I think we often give them credit for, and I think we have to acknowledge that.
Well, ain't that the truth? I mean, that's one of the kind of the underlying falsities that I think many on both sides of the fence, on our side, on the provider side, payer side, we don't give enough credit to the fact that everybody out there is just like us for the most part, and are already interacting with some fairly comprehensively modernistic tools, which have radically simplified their lives to the point where the amount of thought that has to go into making a decision is predominantly already made for them. And that's, I think, very encouraging, noting that there is a high degree of difficulty to get to that zone of enlightenment when it comes to technological modernity. We have a good road ahead of us on this side, but it gives us hope. We're beginning to kind of break through and Turing test this a little bit to the point where it's starting to look like it. But to your point, and I'm going to do it too, the data hasn't necessarily allowed us to resolve those visions yet, because there's just so much of it. So that's good. So it is an issue. I'm not happy, but it's comforting to know that everybody, even a high brand like Geisinger, is also having to deal with this. And we know what those things are that are going to, you mentioned a good amount of them already, but we know eventually that AI will make itself into the kind of clinical scribing and clinical documentation world. It'll find its way into, modernizing and rationalizing content for you, so that, you're not just going to be sending out personalized emails. You'll be sending out personalized words, personalized paragraphs, nuggets of paragraphs that'll be highly, highly specific to individuals. And that's actually a good segue for my next question here. Talk to us a bit about how you see consumer and patient experiences. Customer experiences approaching and advancing personalization for around accessibility, particularly for underserved audiences. We spend a lot of time on those who seem obvious to serve, where we spent less time historically on those that might not have accessibility to healthcare. We know this is a huge issue because of lack of technology, because we're going so technologically focused. Now, some of these people don't have the power to do this. So how are you taking everything that you've learned over the past decade and looking at personalization for those specifically who are underserved?
And I'm glad you mentioned AI because I was remiss in not fully, pointing that out, because a lot of the technology that is being used today in this space is driven by artificial intelligence. And I think folks get confused.
Whether we realize it or not, it's already
exactly.
It's already there.
It's there. And I don't know that there's a full appreciation for that because there's so much buzz around chat and understandably so and appropriately so. We're raising those questions, and that tool, those AI tools are also, have a lot of promise if they're used appropriately, and there's real human oversight, checks and balances. But AI is changing the game in this space because it helps us to personalize, to target, to anticipate. And when you talk about underserved communities, there's a few examples that come to mind readily. One is, thinking about it, technology is great, and folks who have disabilities, whether you're visually impaired or hearing impaired, making sure that the technologies we're employing are appropriate for those audiences. There's an option that works for them, and we are always looking at our digital tools to make sure that they are accessible to folks who have disabilities. Cultural appropriateness and targeting and making sure, as a marketer, I want to make sure that I'm getting a message to somebody. So you think about, versioning and A/B testing and the opportunity to personalize based on the information we have. Now, again, you need some human oversight to make sure that everything that's going out is appropriate. And but you can imagine the value. And one of the things that we are working on at Geisinger is, which, we serve we're statewide with the health plan. The clinical organization serves a very rural, mostly Caucasian population base, but that is changing fast, believe it or not. And we have to respond, and we have to make sure that we're meeting the needs of folks who are not native English speakers, who have different cultural expectations of their healthcare providers, may have hesitancy and trust issues with healthcare organizations. And so I see a lot of opportunity here. And everything from making sure that we're using the appropriate pronouns for folks who have a pronoun preference. All of that can be powered by better technology, better data, and the use of artificial intelligence. It can be a big differentiator.
And you, of course, speak to the hyper segmentation of genealogies, of demographies, of psychographic entities, down to the lowest levels, which is fantastic, right? But man, does it make the job harder. And because now you're radically segmenting even more and more layers of data, so that the power that these new methods, and we'll use AI as kind of a generic reference to advanced machine learning that is rigorously churning on data sets which have never lived together. Now suddenly they're being thrust into the same conversation in order to create a caricature of who you are, not just clinically, but mentally, physiologically, psychologically, so that we understand what you're actually thinking on your journey at the same time, noting that healthcare isn't a journey that everybody wants to be on. They want to be on a health journey. They don't necessarily want to be on a health care journey. And this is something that I'm sure you're seeing a lot of, and we can expose this as go down this rabbit hole as well. There's so many rabbit holes you can go down. But my biggest concern is obviously we know there's a bit of a mental health crisis. If you haven't heard, the impact on that in your world and how you can begin to address it early on is really going to, I think, be one of those personalization areas that we're all going to begin to see here really soon, like really stretching the boundaries of how we communicate early to make sure that people their state of mind is in the best possible place prior to coming in for cancer surgery, orthopedic surgery, heart surgery, or screenings or whatever. It's not an easy time in that regard. Just before I jump on, any quick comments on any of that? Does that, you guys thinking the same thing? Are you kind of in the same realm there in terms of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is no limit to how we can leverage the advances that are being made in machine learning, AI, as you say, and making sure that the data used appropriately. I'm going to keep using that caveat. And you mentioned, behavioral health, mental health. There are a lot of regulatory oversight requirements on how we leverage data relative to those diagnoses. So I want to put everyone who's listening at ease that, there is a lot of oversight to make sure that it's being used appropriately, but at the same time adding value and intervening. I think, we talked about the COVID effect. One of the biggest, this is our highest use case for telemedicine, is behavioral health. It has become a winning offering for folks. And when you think about it, it's obvious and it makes a ton of sense, right? There's the privacy, the convenience, the ability to see a provider from your home. I think it was a no-brainer, and yet it wasn't something that we figured out on our own. It was sort of happenstance through a pandemic that became now probably the new standard of care for behavioral health results.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly glad to see that it's still proving to be a very successful story for you, because for many, kind of dropped off for them, then kind of went back to doing things the same way. But I think the more prominent brands out there have really stuck with that, and time has shown, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of aspects of healthcare that require that degree of privacy, and it'll come back around again, I think, for the rest of the country. Let's kind of move forward here, and we're going to start talking about data here a little bit. Not like we haven't been addressing this in the background. We know we've said this a million times, especially when you kind of really started first venturing well over a decade ago into the deep technical underbelly. That data management is ridiculously hard. And back then it was almost non-existent, right? We were all kind of flying by the seat of our pants, just hoping that we could tether together with super glue and duct tape the right amount of information in order to yield something of promise in market. But these things in advanced analytics have become critical to acquisition performance levels, access, driving consumer experience, satisfaction, et cetera. So what are some of the more recent and popular performance metrics derived from said data that help you better define success in your acquisition results? And you hinted at them earlier, your KPI models, your metrics that matter, but specifically around consumer experience. What metrics are you really using today that showcase that your consumer experiences are improving, and thereby your acquisition results are also improving?
Yeah, we've moved well beyond lead gen and conversion data, and to really understand deep segmentation. We really want to know, more about these customers, and we're slicing the data more thinner. And looking at the campaign results well beyond just conversion rates, right? Like channel performance, time of day of week, versioning, all to help us better target and better execute campaigns. And some folks may have been doing that all along, but I think in healthcare, that's been really hard to get to. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we're in a place where we can really look at our data more strategically and continue to improve.
The next round of performance metrics, to your point, cannot strictly be revenue oriented, because it's eventually going to prove to be a little bit of a missed opportunity to understand where revenue is actually lost. Because if we're really focusing on experience, it's not exactly entirely what you get, it's what you didn't get. And those experience performance metrics, which we're really just starting to get our hands around because of what you mentioned. There's certain regulations that are in place that prevent certain data to be passed around and used in a particular state. Like, we know what those things are. But for what we can ascertain, we have to really get our arms wrapped around that. Because if it is all about experience, which is the path we're on, right? We're moving very quickly away from these terms like CRM and PRM, and these worlds are collapsing on each other. You said it at the beginning, customer what? Customer experience has to be a single thing that is the culmination of all of these years of efforts, including how do I acquire, what's the rationale around acquiring a new consumer to become a patient, all of that thinking, and then turning it into something that we haven't seen yet. But we have all the pieces to it. You mentioned telehealth, underserved communities. Like, we got all the slots. But now how does this next round of harmonized data intelligence allow us to do that? And then at the same time, that will yield new metrics. Again, a lot of what we're just not really doing just yet because we haven't quite put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So that's great. Maybe a quick follow-up on that, thinking along the same lines and kind of what I just said. How do some of these kind of, call it metrics, begin to influence results when it comes to patient experience and retention? How much time do you spend there? Like, how much time do you spend within the patient experience world and the retention world? And how are you, as a marketing leader, tracking?
You just said something that triggered a light bulb for me that I don't know that I
yes, I love it when that happens.
The distinction and the evolution until this very moment, Gary. This is amazing. So, when we first started doing actually, it's true. It's true. When we first started doing CRM, and I know you want to move off that, but targeted marketing, and digital tools and data, where it was a decade or so ago, it was all about like point of sale marketing. I need more orthopedic cases. I wasn't thinking at the time, like, I just wanted to help the orthopedic. I wanted a great orthopedic campaign. I wanted great results for orthopedics. Over here, I was doing the same thing for cardio, same thing for primary care. We did.
I think we wrote some strategies for that stuff, too.
But where we are today is a very different place, where we're looking at the customer as a whole person, and you need a lot of data to do that, and we have that now, and we have the tools to help connect that data, and so we're working in the last couple of years on campaigns that I like to call share of health, like share of wallet in other industries. That's the upselling and cross-selling of services. It's the creating stickiness. And so whether they experience us for the first time as a primary care patient or an orthopedic patient, whatever that is, or they're a member of the health plan and they get their care somewhere else, but can we get them to try us for something? We have a robust pharmacy program. We compete with the big national pharmacies in our market. We offer very convenient mail order service. It is great for people who are on maintenance meds. It's great for care management. It's folks who don't stay on their medications because they can't afford the refills or they can't get out to get their refills, don't do well from a care gap perspective. We have been actively marketing to folks to convince them that they can have better health, they can have convenience, and actually they can save money by switching their prescriptions over to us and allowing us to mail them to their home. There's multiple examples of how we've been doing this with this upselling and cross-selling of services. And I think that's the promise of where we are now. Is it's not just about one campaign. It's about how do we continue to improve the health of our customers, build loyalty, and and keep them loyal. I say the same thing. But it also gets, I think you said something else that's really interesting. It's not just what we're getting, it's what we're not getting. And, not all volume is good, right? And so like we're looking at payer mix and making sure that we're diversifying our payer mix within our clinical services. Obviously, we take care of anyone who comes to the door. But in terms of who I'm targeting from a marketing campaign perspective, who's our best customer? How do I identify that best customer? How do I get more of that best customer? And then how do we make the relationship with those customers stickier and build a deeper relationship? They're less likely to leave us.
When we used it, and we're going to get into that now, so your timing here is good. We spent the heart and soul of your role has always been exactly as you iterated. Don, orthopedics is low. Go out and get them. Okay. Great. Yeah. Okay. Here's $5. Whittle together a media campaign and go find some people. Right. That is still there. But when we talk about that whole dynamic, it is the first series of steps. Even before they become a patient, they're a customer. They're always a customer. So as you said, that patient window is so narrow, you blink your eye, you miss it, right? But as that, those for anybody new, and you mentioned, and it sounded like you were alluding to the fact that you've got a growing amount of newer populations entering into the Geisinger market arena. Is probably and a diverse population, right? That makes a lot of sense. So many of these folks are in fact could be new to Geisinger. That's where loyalty starts. Loyalty starts in those first few steps. Nobody's going to really respond to an acquisition campaign anymore. They're looking for more. They're looking for engagement. Many are tire kickers. I know when I've told you the story a million times. I've dislocated my shoulder a few thousand times, and I'm the typical guy. I put it off forever. I'll suck it up and deal with it until my shoulder's basically falling off. Right? Well, there's a lot of people who do that. And so so loyalty really starts during acquisition and experience. We're really beginning to see these worlds, almost these chasms not really exist anymore. And so now it begins to even change our mind there. So this is a good segue into that world a little bit more deeply. And I'm going to try to blend these conversations a little bit together because to your point, it really is just one thing. It's one experience. And we have to be looking at all these terms across their entire journey, which now is first point of contact through life. And we continue to get better, to come back to data, at aggregating patient data, stratifying patients. And now we've got things like high risk, low risk, rising risk groups, which in your payer world, I know you probably eat, sleep, and drink these terms all the time. And in that world, we talk about how conditions can be managed by closing gaps in care and improving wellness over time, which I suspect is, when you talk about your pharmacy programs and everything else, a lot of that is hinting at wellness, is hinting at prevention, right? Maybe not smacking you directly in the face with it, but certainly yielding into that. So what are some examples of what you would define now, kind of getting out of the consumer growth sector and now moving into the middle, or slightly bleeding into VBC, and we'll get there. Example of effective patient engagement that can be deployed to not only close those gaps more quickly, because you mentioned like care management, CRM for care management. Okay, so you're hinting at it, but at the same time, so close those gaps more quickly, and you're looking at some examples, but also proactively and simultaneously methods to improve wellness and loyalty. Answer that however way you see fit, but I think you see where I'm going with it, because this is the next kind of arena that you're massively going to be thrust into if you're not already. Curious of what you might be working on there and some examples that you can share with the audience.
Yeah, and I've sort of hinted at some of those examples already, but you're right. And we are Geisinger has been in value-based care for a long time. It's our DNA. We take all payers, and so we live in we have a foot in each boat. We have value-based care. We have fee for service. I have to market for both. But on the value-based care side, there is a great opportunity. As a marketer, I really appreciate the opportunities that are now available to us to employ marketing best practices, marketing-like campaigns using audience segmentation and journey building to target people who need to be motivated to close a care gap, to get engaged in their health. We have responsibility for them because of the value-based contracts we have with them. We're managing their care. We need to make sure that they're coming in for their annual wellness check if they're a Medicare eligible patient. Pharmacy medication adherence, which gets to the pharmacy option. Annual screenings or routine screenings. Like we have mammogram campaigns, we have colonoscopy campaigns. And we know who needs to be it's not just blanket, right? It's you're 6 months behind. You should have had this screening, 6 months ago. Can we schedule an appointment? So it's using data to find the people who need to receive that message. But it's not just a letter from your provider. The marketing team's involved. There's creative. There's a campaign aspect to it.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit more, dare I say, human. Because Don's over there penning every single.
It's funny. Well,
or at least approving it. I hope you're approving.
We have taken over my digital team has taken on. We have a program now called Centralized Customer Communications. If it's going out to a customer, it's coming through our shop. There's brand review. Like, we just don't send stuff out anymore from clinical departments. Yeah, now stuff.
That's awesome. So now your content. I'm gonna simplify this for the audience. Your content is now under brand review.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And we're looking at it more holistically.
Really
holistically. Don't just check the box and say, well, we sent a letter out to all the patients who were behind in their mammograms. No, let's put them on a journey. Let's track it. Did they respond? If they responded, we'll take them off. The non-responders get another touch point and then another touch point. And, we'd change up the message. Let's create some urgency. Which CTAs work better? If we give them a digital CTA versus a phone CTA, and all that gets back to what we were talked about earlier in terms of looking at the data and letting it inform how you continue to improve the work. And hey, it works in acquisition marketing. It absolutely should work in these use cases, and it does.
And I'm just going to sidebar and ask a quick question, which I know you'll know the answer to. For what percentage of let's just call it your outreach efforts, are you at that level doing everything that you just stated? Is it like 30%, 40%, 80%? I think the audience will be understood, because again, I keep falling back on the fact that you've been at this probably a little bit longer than most. It wouldn't surprise me if you came up and said, Gary, it's like 90%. Like, we're pretty much doing this across the board. But I wanted to ask you.
There's a lot of regulatory stuff, mandatory stuff because of the insurance business but even that stuff gets brand review. We fast track stuff that has to be urgently out the door. And then we've got an omni-channel approach. If we can reach people through an authenticated portal, because we know they're on the portal. So here's data, right? I know you have an account. I'm going to send you a message through the account, and we'll send you an email saying there's a message for you in your patient portal or your member portal and it's basically a reminder. Or you're going to get an email that looks like an ad. Maybe we target you with a text. Maybe, it all depends on what you've opted in for, what your preferences are. This is the other thing that data is, and personalization is important for, making sure asking people how they want to be reached and using those channels.
Because now you're basically saying, okay, here's all our front-facing raw intelligence, which is singularly directional outward. Now you're saying you can all come back and now tell us how to use that so that we can improve that outward. So now if everybody comes in and says, well, I want it this way, this way, this way, and this way, that changes the entire landscape for that person, and basically then everybody else. So now your entire data hierarchy becomes, is now operating on multiple levels, as in a way that it's harder to scale over time when you start adding in consumer selected and services, consumer selected, and basically starting to make that shift of putting a lot of stuff back in customers' hands, which is, again, that's part of the path that we're on, is this slow yield to, almost, what is it, the Burger King line? You can have it your way to a degree, right? To a degree. We have to get there. It's probably going to be another 5, 6, 7 plus years before we really get it to a point where we need it to be. But that is one of those root journeys that we're all on, whether we like it, realize it or not. And it does have a lot of obviously benefit, but it does make it harder on the providers to turn the ship, right? With a small rudder. I'm not saying Geisinger, because you've been at this for a long time and you're way ahead of the pack, but I'm really thinking about those who are listening to you right now and sitting there kind of just, face palming, going, gosh, so there's actually health systems out there at this level doing it.
And it requires the tools. Yeah. It requires the data. It requires people who know how to leverage the data and the tool and the technology, because you can't get to that successfully manually, right? So if you're just relying on people to do that and spreadsheets, I mean, so again, machine learning, making sure that you've got the right tech stack where things are integrated in a way that data can flow, will allow that to be easier, ultimately.
And just if I'm thinking of another sidebar question that this easy question for you to answer that many will probably be interested in. Again, noting that, you're going to start making those advancements into efficiency-based tools so that you're not in a position, because we know that budgets are not going to get bigger. They're probably going to flatline here if they haven't already in the next 1 or 2 years until things start to recuperate, so to speak. What is the makeup of your staff currently look like? And I'm thinking mostly around the two dynamics. Like, do you have data analysts on staff? Do you have content writers on staff? And if so, I'm just kind of curious, like, how many, and is there anything that you're in the midst of, like, farming out? You don't have to name where, but like, what's that balance and variability?
I have a small marketing analytics team. It's 4 people. We're an $8 billion organization.
Probably 4 more than most departments.
Content, we have, I don't know, half a dozen content folks in-house, but both of those teams are augmented by external resources. We have, agency and freelance support for both those teams.
So, in that regard, when we talk about, again, coming back to some of the framing that we've got going on here, patient engagement is different than acquisition. Communication methods are different. Content is different. The guiding aspect of it is different as opposed to pure growth. There's a, like you used the term before, a high degree of responsibility, ensuring that what is going out in that zone, whether it's 1 day or 3 months, is at a highly critical and advanced level. And when it comes to, at least I think, and we'll get there, but right now, some of the AI mechanisms that we have in place would be stretching to the limits of their ability to accurately portray what needs to be said at that moment. We'll get there, but again, the data really needs to be perfect in order to do that, and many are fairly risk averse in terms of kind of turning that. So it's good to see that you've still got content writers on staff, you've still got analysts on staff, kind of mining all of this while the rest of these tools start catching up, and then all of these folks will advance into different capacities, because once these tools come in, we're all going to have to grow and kind of rejuvenate how we look at a lot of this work. And that's the ongoing trudge of being in these kind of, heavily customer focused strategic roles. Even I trip up on it. Let's dive in a little bit further, kind of keeping going on the kind of wellness aspect. And this is obviously for us at Innovaccer, I'll just say this is how the company was founded, and is now obviously venturing deep. In addition to data management, we're massively, marrow deep in the world of customer engagement and customer experience. What kind of work are you doing on the health equity side? Those are the two big words over the last 24 months or so that are continue to rise up. We've got DE officers and health equity officers, popping up everywhere now, and rightfully so, way overdue. What sort of work are you specifically involved in there as an extension of much of what you've kind of described already?
Yeah, my team works very closely with our health, our diversity and equity and inclusion office, and the health plan part of our organization in particular has requirements to meet in this space. So we partner on accessibility and making sure that we are able to reach people in the way that they need to be reached, and speaking to them in the right manner. I think closing care gaps for underserved communities is obviously critically important, and it is going to require the type of infrastructure that we've been discussing here to succeed at that. It's because it gets to personalization, it gets to segmentation, and the level of versioning of content that is necessary to address the unique needs of specific populations. And I was speaking broadly earlier about mammogram reminders, but if you think about a particular population who maybe is even has in unacceptable data as it relates to adherence to a particular care gap, you may need a completely different approach. And as marketers, we are in the best position to create a message that can resonate with a target audience with the appropriate research and understanding of the use case, and then leveraging all of this to reach them. But we're in the early days of that work right now, I'll be honest.
And I think everybody is at the end of the day. We're still trying to figure out what the, I think, necessary components are of that degree of personalization, because is there enough data that can even kind of point to it? I don't think there is yet. And we're trying to figure that out. So it, clearly not alone. But keeping kind of going down that path, and this is where we've talked about growth, talked about patient engagement. We've jumped around in that world quite a bit. Now we're kind of on the back end of a holistic customer journey, in that we're now our minds switch. And you mentioned it already, so I'm going to give you a really good chance to kind of dive into this a little bit. On population health, Geisinger has been and continues to be one of the leading models of what these terms and acronyms should look like. Clearly out ahead of most, and many of those who are beginning to dip their toes into these waters are doing so admirably. But there's a lot to figure out there, especially when XYZ health system has been spending most of their time, 99% of it, in fact, as a growth entity, fee for service. And now this mind shift, and it is a cultural mind shift, which has to be brought up from the surface and risen up through the organization in a way that takes time. What are the most important consumer-centric technical or administrative functions that need to find a home in population health right now, pertaining to your role? You have hinted at it a little bit already, but I'd love for you to hear kind of how you describe marketing's impact, consumer and customers' impact on population health.
I think, as marketers, we need to get more involved, and we are doing this at Geisinger, but in general, more involved with the teams that manage quality and care gaps. We need to, I say this all the time, and outside of this conversation, successful marketers need to understand the business that you're in, and how, and
you say that to the regard that you most
it's
probably
it's not
don't.
You're creative.
I completely agree.
And you can, you know how to manage an agency, and you understand brand, and you understand all this,
right.
all the right. elements of marketing that we've been discussing here in terms of data and the tech stack. If you don't understand the business that you're in, and if you're in value-based care, you need to know the people who are managing the programs that drive value-based care. And so that's, as a marketer, you need to get close to that work. And, I think the premise of this podcast is all about, the chief marketing officer role. I am in close contact with our chief medical officer. I talk to the head of our health plan almost daily. I mean, we need to be tight on strategy. And my people work closely with their people. But the programs, further down the org chart, the folks who lead patient experience in the hospitals, the folks who lead the chief nursing executive is another person. And in our health plan, we've got, quality and care gap programs and leaders there who run those programs. And we have a marketing strategist assigned to those teams to work with them to help manage those campaigns that I referenced earlier. That's critically important. We have to understand what the objectives are for those programs and for the organization. We want to achieve 5-star status, for CMS with our health plan and with our hospitals. Well, you got to understand all the criteria for that. And that actually is closing care gaps and delivering care and having a good customer experience. And so where do we have gaps? Where do we have opportunity? And how do we do better? Some of that can be solved by marketing, and others we just need to be in support, or we need to lean in and encourage some operational changes before we can go to market. This is the other way, and maybe this is a bit of a sidebar, but this is a conversation we have a lot. Are you ready for marketing? So going back to acquisition marketing, right, but I think it supports this. We don't have an experience that would tell me that I can market this. So, I mean, being that voice in the organization to always to sort of remind folks to put the customer first. And you want to be, of course, caregivers care about the patient, but thinking about the customer holistically and making sure that we're not promoting a program that isn't ready to be promoted. But the care gap closures are necessary for us, and we're, like I said, we're embedded, and we make sure that we're close to the business on that.
That's why I asked this question, because that's the answer I was expecting from you, but haven't quite gotten maybe in some of the other podcasts, and we'll see how it kind of continues to go. This, for me, and many of those within the walls of Innovaccer, and maybe even some without, know that this is the highest priority for me personally, is to see the blending of these worlds come together, because they need you and you need them at the end of the day. And what gets in the way of that? Well, departmental fragmentation. They're over there kind of doing their thing, and it's kind of a project, and but I have to vote. No, it's an interesting thing in the provider space. As you know, I have not always been in healthcare. I was outside for the first half of my career, and the way that internal departments and within health systems are not, nothing to Geisinger, just as a generalization, is, well, I'm in this department, and we do our thing here, and you guys are over there, and you do your thing, right? It's kind of scary. So But again, what I think COVID showed us is this notion of, shaking people out of that apathy and understanding and yielding to the obvious, which is that, our customers, regardless of where you're at, they are in fact suffering in some degree. So the betterment for them is a mirror effect of the betterment of us. That yes, we have different ideologies, but in fact, they are the same ideology. My ideology, although at the front end of the journey, is to in fact help grow the organization, but at the back end of the organization, back end of the journey, if they are quote unquote healed, I, Don Stanziano, never want to see them again. So in that regard, what do I need to do to work with you in order to better prescribe an accurate, represented post-discharge through life, stream of communications that just come through the consciousness of, I wouldn't call it necessarily cross-selling and upselling, and more about just doing the right thing. But to your point, with a program that they were ready for, that has a progression down cycle from whatever service or surgery or kind of method that they came through the health system, not easy to do. Would you agree that we're really at the bottom of the first inning with this sort of stuff, but that the promise of this kind of blending of these two worlds coming together is in fact probably what the model is going to look like 10 years from now? Would you agree with that?
I agree 100%. 100%. And I wasn't sure a few years ago that we would get there. But I'm sitting here today talking to you pretty confident that we will. I think that the marketing role, the chief marketing officer role, is absolutely well positioned to get to influence, if not own, the strategies around this eventually. But it's early days. But I think we are getting there in terms of the partnerships and the collaborations and the understanding. Some of it's born out of necessity that we just all have to figure this out and we have to do it. And I think there's a better appreciation. And some of it is the tools and the technology have caught up and matured to a point where now we can actually offer something of true value to the organizations that we work for. But I think for me, I have to always be evangelizing the capabilities of what we offer and remind folks in the organization that this is something we can help you with. You don't have to figure this out on your own. You don't need to go hire, a vendor. We actually have tools already in house who do this. We have partners already that we work with. And I have a great relationship with our CIO. We have, a great IT team. But I think the other thing that's evolved a lot for marketing is, and this is where I have to tout my digital team. We have a lot of capabilities. Folks will go to IT asking for things that my team produces, and that's fine. I get it. It's confusing. But that also is a reminder to me that there's not a full appreciation for what we're doing to support the business. But that's a long answer to your very simple question of, do you think we're going to get there? I absolutely think we're going to get there. I think but we are at, in early innings. I agree.
And you have a powerhouse team. I obviously know many of your staff, and you are very fortunate. You hire well. The general, your commentary there, I pray that many directors of marketing in health systems right now are hearing this, or VPs of marketing, those kind of on their journey where, Don was 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they're on that path now, and they're rising up within, the Mercy Healths or the Bon Secours or the VC or wherever they're at, that they kind of hear that and they take that to heart, because that's their journey, right? As you and I are collecting our grays, we'll be here a little bit longer, right? But they're the ones that are going to pick up the mantle and have to kind of finish it, because that's about a decade worth. That's a decade run. Hopefully less. Hopefully it's maybe 5, but it's probably more about 10 years. They're the ones that are going to finish this job and pick up that mantle, and that's a hard thing to make. It's hard to do at the individual system level. It's ridiculously hard to do it at a national level. to get everybody kind of beating to the same drum, noting that every health system has their own different perspective as to what their objectives should be in their general business model. So,
right. Well, and I think there's an opportunity for folks at that level in their careers in an organization that offers this opportunity. If your CMO is not doing this today, or your team is not involved in this today, and you have an interest in it, if you're, like you said, VP of digital, VP of, growth marketing, or a director in one of those teams, raise your hand, talk to your CMO, say, we should be doing this. All it takes is a couple test campaigns. I mean, do a use case. Try something easy. And that's how we got into at Geisinger. That's how we got into the centralized customer communications. We were on the last step in the process where we were basically just pushing the button on the distribution tool. And it's like, wait a minute, we can make this a lot better. And it's also, this is killing us because we have no advance warning when these things happen. And we got to organize this better. And you start out with one or two, and then you have a prototype, and then folks start to realize, oh, yeah, this actually is better. There's incredible opportunity out there. I'm convinced.
There is. And you bring up another great little micro point. For the love of Pete, please test more. Don't be afraid. It's not hard to, like you said, just whip up a program. I say whip up. For us, it's like whipping it up, but to create a program that is very focused on an area within the journey that you haven't necessarily touched upon yet. Test it, because that's, that again, there's this kind of risk averse mentality. Oh, but it's getting into this zone. Don't just test it. If you test it in a micro audience and it doesn't work, guess what? You only failed within that micro audience, and that's how we learn. And I think that's another kind of, you're great at that, Jeff. You're all great at it because you've been through this for well over a decade plus now. For this next round of folks that are coming in, there's a lot of new faces going to kind of rising up. I hope that they learn in the same capacity, because that's how healthcare, specifically within our framework, progressively will continue to, and more quickly, the iterations of improvement will become far more narrow as long as you keep testing more and knock out the things that don't work, because that's really what the exercise is all about, is finding the things that don't work so that you eventually know the areas that you can entirely focus on. So we're winding down here. I just got a couple more topics that kind of round out this whole thing, and it kind of is a culmination of a lot of what we've chatted about before. And here's a real simple one for you. Are VBC patients, in your mind, loyal patients? And if they are or not, I'd love to hear your opinion as to why.
I think they could be your most loyal. They should be, because theoretically you should be having more interactions with them than you have with any other patients under your care, because they need that. These are folks who we're incentivized to keep them healthy. Every individual should have their own incentive to be a healthy person. So so you have that overlap. Encouragement, maybe education and awareness. Folks don't always realize that some of the things they're doing in their lives are making them sick. Yeah. And that, and maybe demystifying some of the things that are holding them back from, taking advantage of preventive care, like colonoscopies and mammograms. Really, it's not a big deal. It's once every decade. Just do it. For the colonoscopy. I think if they're done right, and we've been talking about this the whole time, but as a marketer, I love this conversation, because the value-based care patients are the ones that you can put on journeys. You can have multiple touch points. You can test and try things. And it's all based on their needs as a customer and what you can offer, the value you can offer to them. And it also creates the opportunity to recommend and create additional stickiness. For marketing to me is not about selling. It's about building a relationship with the customer. And I think this model that value-based care creates for us allows us to build a long-lasting relationship with our customers.
So on that, and then final big question to kind of round this out, when we use the word, and a lot of these words are kind of intermixing with each other. So when you think about retaining a loyal customer, and what the caricature and the persona of that individual is, which is, again, we'll likely quantify that as the best type of customer for Geisinger in your market, in your geography, with types of physicians that are there, right? That all also comes into play. It's your decision, but it's just as much their decision. There's a harmonious balance that shows itself if things are done, if experiences are articulated correctly. This is why we love the brands we love, right? It's not just the brand. It's me, like you say, experiencing the brand and interacting with the brand at some, unearthly level that just kind of, magically appears. But little do they know, it's, we help nudge that quite a bit more than we probably take credit for. So when we think about the retainment of loyal customers, born and unborn, for generations, should we be thinking like that now? And if so, what's some of the kind of more predominant retention work, digital and not? Because I know Jeff talks a lot about, 65? What are the? You're right. Amazing. The first time he told me about all that, I was like, holy cow! They're really going for a huge audience that in our time and in this generation is kind of moving. Talk to me about that, and kind of maybe some of the digital work that goes along with that, and anything else that just really, we're doing an incredible job of retaining the most loyal people in our market. We know who they are. This is what it looks like.
We have great retention at Geisinger, and some of that is, I can't take credit for. The brand has been in existence for a century. There's multi-generational affinity, and you hear the stories when you're out in the communities that we serve, of people whose lives or their parents' lives have been changed. But you have to continue to reinforce that, and you have to continue to bring in new folks who feel that way as well. And I think it's getting beyond transactional relationships and episodic relationships. And this is where I think our some of the challengers in our space, some of the disruptors in our space are going to, and you're seeing this now, they're already backing off because they're trying to peel off transactional aspects of healthcare. We want to do primary care in the pharmacy, or we want to do, we think we can do telemedicine for you, but okay, well, but what about if I need a cardiologist, or, and so, yeah, we don't do that. We don't save your life.
We don't do that.
So I think, we have an advantage in this space if we're smart about it, but we have to get that sort of top of the funnel stuff right, which is not always our strong suit in healthcare, right? And I think that's where the loyalty comes in, because if you're engaging with people when they're not sick, but when they actually are interested in managing their health, and you're delivering a delightful experience, a memorable experience. We like to say at Geisinger, our brand promise is making better health easy. Well, no one's going to argue with making something easy, right? So make it easy. And healthcare is not typically easy. So it's not an easy promise to keep, but we try every day. But I think the ways you do that is showing up where they need, where your customers are, and delivering, the services and the experiences that are going to bring them back to you, and anticipating their needs. So you mentioned 65 Forward is a great example of a program that we stood up for people who are 65 and older, who are on our Medicare Advantage plan. You actually have to switch plans at the next opportunity. You can join the clinic before, and it's a primary care practice, but it has a lot of amenities, and you can see your doctor as often as you like. Long appointments because the panel sizes are smaller. What we get out of that, and this is value-based care coming to life, is folks who have multiple issues but schedule an appointment for one. In a typical physician's office, you can't talk about your shoulder if your appointment's about your knee. So, but when you have long appointments and you're seeing your doctor more often and you're building that relationship, you can talk to Mrs. Jones about her heart, about her loneliness, about her arthritis. And guess what? She doesn't go to the emergency room as often. She's not admitted to the hospital. She doesn't need a lot of extra services. We keep her healthier. And that's the goal. And that's what value-based care is all about. And, oh, by the way, while she's there, if she wants to stick around a little longer, there's probably a card game going on in the activities room. There's a fitness center. There's a little yeah.
Gin rummy. This is probably gin rummy.
But that's stickiness, and that's creating a product that is super easy to market.
And so again, I hope many are still listening, and those terms which we all would, we'd laugh at pre-COVID, make it easy. Well, no, it's not easy. This stuff is hard. Well, we're now, as you said, like you said before, the technology's catching up to the hard. It's starting to look easy. And the general nature of that, and that you're doing, is if you have a thought or an idea that sounds crazy, but it's easy, it's likely the right idea, right? And as long as you're in the regulation boundaries, right? But if it's an easy process, or you're filling some sort of a workflow gap, or you've got a digital program that's highly cumulative at the VBC level for people 65 and over, and it's this homogeneous, last quarter of my life, but man, everything's way better out here now, and at just the right time to do that. And you show the impacts on the outcomes, which is reduced readmissions and all a reduction of cost. Like, that's easy. And so we stress for our young marketers and our young experience managers and engagement managers to not shy away from that. So thank you for saying that. And I hope that message resonates, is that it is getting easier to come up with these ideas and synthesize what used to be incredibly difficult constructs, which probably honestly would still be going on if COVID didn't hit. So maybe that's the one good thing that came out of COVID, as I like to tell people. But you got the keys to the castle these days. It's piecing it together like you have in the right way. So last question, and then we'll let you get back to your day job. If you could snap your fingers, Don, and make just one single change or improvement in any aspect of healthcare today, and everybody gets this question, what would it be and why?
As much advancement as we've made in this space, and as much as it is easier than it's ever been to use data, I'm going to say making it easier to use data. I mean, that is still the thing that slows us down and trips us up, is how do we connect the valuable information that we all have in our organizations and activate it. It's if I could snap my finger and make that all just happen, that would be my wish, because it would solve a lot of the day-to-day issues that we have in our organization.
Yeah. Well, obviously we should probably talk about that. It proves to be you think about all the systems and subsystems. So I agree with you, obviously. We've been at this for a while. But you think about if I'm to break down the barriers, there's consumer data, there's rev cycle data, there's supply chain data, there's patient data, there's SDOH data. I mean, you can just go on and on and on.
It's all in silos.
What's that? It's all in silos. Continues to be in silos. So many who are on this, their transformational journey, right? That's the big word. I'm on this transformational journey. Okay, good for you. What does that mean? There are, to your point, and the simplest way to put it, there's 3 layers of transformation. There's application, what we see on the screen for both physicians, the administration, and those to whom they serve. There's the workflows that drive those parameters. There's obviously customer journeys, there's physician journeys, there's nurse journeys, there's care manager journeys. Again, those have to interact with each other in some malleable kind of Wonkavator way, right? But none of those things, all of those things come to a screeching halt in terms of their efficacy and scale if the data journeys, to your point, are not harmoniously designed and equally as translucent and malleable over and continue to improve, naturalistically improve, organically, to use your word, improve over time through many of the machines and mechanisms that are now really speeding up in terms of their function and functionality. That in the most simplest way, that's, to your point, it all goes back to that. And if every health system would take that opportunity like you have throughout your career to continue to address that first and foremost, instead of, all the other stuff. And all the other stuff just naturally, it's all downstream of that. So, and I know that's been your journey, and you've seen that probably at levels far more than most have. So anyway, I agree.
It's a lot better. It's a lot better. And it's better because folks realize we have to fix it. And that's great. But we have more to do. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's not an ELT meeting where you're not screaming from the rooftop on how to, sitting in a boardroom like, I've told you guys. Well, hey, this is, man, I took up a lot of your time. This has been a pleasure. Obviously we've spent a good amount of time with each other in the past, and it always is encouraging every time I get on the phone with you, and particularly, and obviously some others who we've been through the rigor here over the past decade plus, probably going on close to, for you,
it's probably been
20 plus years, if not more. Yeah, right. Well, I'm thinking like the real hard part of this healthcare stuff, for me, it's only been about maybe 12 or 13 years. But I think we met almost 10 years ago now to see the advancements that we're all kind of going through and kind of where we're netting out and how our thinking is propagating. It's a really incredibly interesting and curious time. I'm very excited for you in terms of what you have coming up next in your journey. It's going to be a great run. But I really do appreciate you carving time out of what I know is a very, very busy schedule for you and your illustrious team, all of whom I'm sure are very thankful that you're leading the charge at Geisinger Health. Any final comments from you? If not, we'll let you get back to your day.
Well, just a thank you, Gary, and appreciate the kind words, and always great spending time with you. Always goes by too fast, but I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
It does. Yeah, me too.
Right.
Well, Vegas, baby.
We'll
Vegas or
Vegas,
bust.
and, appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Don. Really appreciate you taking the time yet again to chat with us today about the reinvention of your role. For our listeners, please don't forget to check the show notes for links to the resources and contact information related to today's show. This is a big one. We went on a little bit longer on this one because we needed to, and Don and his team have done an amazing amount of work. So you'll see a lot of that context in there. And certainly stay tuned for the next Innovation Accelerator podcast from Innovaccer for more shows covering the healthcare IT topics that you care about the most. For more information on reinventing the CMO and other healthcare IT topics, please visit Innovaccer.com. I'm Gary Druckenmiller Jr., and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Innovation Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Innovaccer, the data platform that accelerates innovation in healthcare. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to related resources and other information. And stay tuned to the Innovation Accelerator podcast for more programs about the healthcare IT topics you care about. Accelerate innovation, digital transformation, and your success with population health, customer relationship management, and value-based care with Innovaccer. For more information, please visit Innovaccer.com.